Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your schedule and joining us. My name is Bethany Servin and I am the Marketing Director here at UsableNet. Our webinar today is Analog Laws Meet Digital Technology. Is your website ADA compliant? Our speakers today are Jason Taylor, Chief Innovation Strategist here at UsableNet, and our featured presenter and special guest is Louis Weiner, partner at Evershed Sutherland. I'm going to go ahead and let Louis introduce himself now and tell you a little bit about him and his firm's experience in this area.
Thank you, Bethany. My great pleasure to be presenting this webinar with Jason, a proven professional in this area. His company, UsableNet, is one of the premier ADA compliance companies out there, and it's, again, a great pleasure to be working with him and his colleagues. Evershed Sutherland is a global law firm. We have 69 offices in 39 countries, but most important and relevant for today is our background and experience in the ADA and ADA technology area. We first got involved in this area about 6 or 7 years ago when we were asked to represent a class of blind federal government contractors who were unable to access and navigate the government's website that government contractors need to access in order to register as government contractors and, most importantly, get paid. Rather unbelievably, the government itself's website was not ADA compliant. When we were asked to handle the lawsuit, looking at it, again, putting ourselves back 6 or 7 years ago, we recognized the enormous impact that this lawsuit could have and how critically important that lawsuit and the learning that would come with it would have on our ability to educate our clients as to their need to have their websites, which are now ubiquitous, making sure that they are ADA compliant. The title of this program, Analog Laws Meet Digital Technology, I think is particularly apt. The ADA, as we'll discuss briefly in a moment, was enacted in the early 1990s. It is an analog law, but we have digital technology, and the asymmetry between the two creates risk for every company that's operating a website or participating in the digital economy. And we'll talk about what that means and the scope of that as well. We know, for example, with respect to curb cuts, the access by which people in wheelchairs have to get from a parking lot into a store, we know how wide those have to be to the inch. We know how high rails in restrooms have to be, how high they have to be off the ground to a millimeter. But we don't have laws that tell us how your website can be compliant with the ADA. We have an analog law that was enacted in an era before we had this digital technology that's now being applied to digital technology. And again, the asymmetry between that law and the technology is what creates risk for your companies and the way that you're doing business online and digitally.
Jason Taylor at UsableNet. Louis, that was a great introduction to also the areas that we're going to cover today. One of my roles here at UsableNet is running our research. We track every digital-based ADA lawsuit in the United States that's filed federally today. So we capture a lot of the data about the types of companies that are being sued, the types of remedies that are being requested by plaintiffs, and generally an overall giving back to the community about the trends that we're seeing in this particular space. Today, it's going to primarily be Louis talking about a number of things. One, he's going to give a background on the ADA and sort of talk about how we got here. Then we're going to cover the litigation trends that we're seeing right now. And then we'll do a little segment on the general defense of an ADA website lawsuit, how that can be separated into 3 particular areas. And then we're going to talk about practical tips and best practices to mitigate the risk of being issued with a lawsuit and basically protecting your company going further. One of the things we typically like to do, especially for Louis and myself, is to understand who's actually listening to this call. So we've got a little poll that we'd love everyone just to participate in. It gives us an idea of the types of people that are listening to this webinar and on this webinar, so we can tailor the content we've got a reasonably widespread across, people that are working inside teams that are testing and remediating. Consultancy and agencies have a big role in this, especially if a client has purchased that website off an agency. It's involving legal counsel, clearly, because the lawsuits involve legal counsel, but it's also a very much important to involve the marketing team, so that sort of reflects that.